Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, June 24th, 2025, and our friend Scott Ritter is back with us. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get started with the ceasefire. It was amazing to see that Donald Trump announcing that it was a ceasefire right after he announced it. Israel attacked Iran, then Iran attacked Israel in the last minutes of ceasefire coming in effect. What has happened? What's your take on what has happened?
Well, I mean, I liken this to two children who, they keep hitting each other. You got to be last. No, you're last. You're last. Hopefully it's come to an end. I don't know. What I can infer from what's happening is that neither Israel nor Iran want to continue this conflict. Israel has not accomplished its goals and objectives, and neither has Iran. Iran was making statements about how they could continue this forever. They were ready to launch missiles forever. And yet, at the first opportunity, they took it. They said, yep, we'll do the ceasefire. And Israel was begging the United States to get a ceasefire in place. And what this tells me is that both sides have been hurt badly, and they don't want to continue this war. And that speaks volumes to the lack of preparedness on the part of each nation. If you remember Pepe Escobar back in October of last year, whenever True Promise 2 took place, he wrote an article about how an F-35 was lit up by Iranian air defense and had to run away because those Iranians, they had the whole thing locked down. S-400s in place, Russian air defense, Su-35, none of that existed, and nor does it exist now. The Iranian air defense was inadequate, absolutely inadequate. The Israelis defeated it. And the Israelis, while I'm not going to quite buy into total air supremacy, the fact is Israel was able to put bombs on targets anywhere it wanted to in Iran. And that speaks volumes, because that means that Israel was doing real harm to Iran. Well, not fatal harm. Iran was able to continue to launch its strikes, but the Iranian notion that they could ride out this attack indefinitely, I think the Iranians didn't have confidence in that posture. Israel, on the other hand, thought that this war would be short and quick. They thought they had the decapitation strike in place. Shock and awe would collapse the regime. That didn't work. They were hoping that their ballistic missile defense shield, together with American assistance, would be able to prevent significant damage being done to Israel. They're wrong. Israel got pounded like it's never been pounded before, and the harm was real, devastating. We don't know the extent to which, because Israel has, of course, put on a media blackout. But when the final reporting is done, you'll see the Iranians were very effective at hitting Israel, as effective at hitting Israel as Israel was to hit Iran, or maybe even more so. And the Israelis just couldn't continue this conflict politically. And so both nations were desperate for the ceasefire. But because neither nation was defeated, both nations have to posture as if they've somehow prevailed. This is a psychological game being played right now. And that's important to point out, because that psychological game, serves as the foundation of going forward. I think most people, I know you have, and me as well, have taken a deep sigh of relief that there's a ceasefire in place. But the confidence of the ceasefire holding is not high on my part, because there are too many unresolved issues and too much ego, national pride, the ego of the biggest egomaniac in the world, Donald Trump, and then of course the narcissistic tendencies of Benjamin Netanyahu. So, we're not out of the woods yet, but why don't we just go ahead and take a deep breath and say, whew, the bombing has stopped, the missiles have stopped, and that's a good thing for the moment.
Just letting the situation unravel, the way it unraveled under the Trump administration and his policy in the Middle East. What was the outcome for Donald Trump? What was the outcome for the administration? When you look at the attack, when you look at the way that they led Israel attacking Iran?
In order to know that, we have to know what the genuine, intention is of Donald Trump in this regard. We can be guided, or at least I thought we could be guided by statements he made last September while he was still candidate Trump about, how he was looking for, there's a deal to be made with Iran that can lift the sanctions and move forward. But I think what we found is that Donald Trump the entanglement with Israel is real. He can't disentangle from Israel. He can't disengage from Israel. And so he was sort of in a trap, an Israeli trap with Iran. And he was damned if he did and damned if he didn't. His political base was primarily composed of people who were seeking non-military intervention. And yet the people he surrounded him with, his political power core, were pro-Zionist, pro-Israeli elements who believed that Iran must be confronted decisively up to and including a force. And so Donald Trump was stuck in the middle there. In retrospect, people may come out and say that he was a genius in the way that he navigated these troubled waters. Because if you think about it, what military price did the United States pay for bombing Iran? None, just the cost of the attack. No lives lost. The Iranian retaliation was as politically motivated as Trump's attack. Trump bombed 3 empty sites. Whether he telegraphed his intent to the Iranians or not, we don't know at this stage. We know that the Iranians
that he did. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we know that the Iranians telegraphed their intent not to. Iran wasn't looking to kill Americans, and America wasn't looking to kill Iranians. But Trump needed to be seen as being willing to bomb Iran and to have taken that step. And so this is why you get all the rhetoric about the most magnificent destructive obliteration in the world. We are the greatest thing, B-2 bombers, medals around the necks. But at the end of the day, it was pure political theater, just an act of political theater, as was the Iranian retaliation. And what's interesting is right after that occurred, it's as if there couldn't be a ceasefire until they checked off these boxes. The United States had to check off the "we bombed Iran" box, and Iran had to check off the "we attacked American installations" box. And then suddenly Qatar is making phone, or I guess Qatar, who made phone calls, and Iran's going, "Yep, we're in. We're willing to do this ceasefire thing." And the Israelis are like, "Please make this happen. We really need this to happen." So I think it was front loaded. I think the talk about a ceasefire, the how to make this happen, was front loaded, which means that what Trump did in bombing these sites was designed to create the conditions for a ceasefire, one that would be politically acceptable in the United States, one that would be politically acceptable in Israel, and created the conditions for political acceptance in Iran. If that's the case, then Trump, deserves credit for his actions. I mean, we saw in the past with North Korea, his fire and brimstone, fire and fury. I'm going to nuke you off the face of the earth, moving things around. And even when he was engaged in actual diplomacy with North Korea, he tends to put out social media postings that are childlike. I mean, that's why I call him a man-child, because the way he postures himself is not that of a mature, dignified, sophisticated leader. This is a very intellectually not complicated, the way he talks in all caps and using words and such, but it's effective, meaning that it accomplished the task. So I think, the jury's still out, but we have a ceasefire. And now what Trump needs to do is bring an end to this nuclear nonsense. I don't think he's going to be able to sustain the 0% enrichment. I think he knows. Remember when Steve Witkoff began the negotiations, which were clearly just a setup for this knockout punch. Marco Rubio has admitted that. March 7th, he said the decision was made to attack. That's a decision, joint decision by the United States and Israel. April 14th is when the first round of negotiations took place. So the United States knew going into the negotiations it was a setup. I mean, I don't know how we recover from that. But Witkoff, I don't think knew. I think Witkoff was actually trying to negotiate in good faith. And then Witkoff got off script because he got a deal. Hey, we're going to have a deal. 3.75% enriched cap. We're ready to go. And Trump was like, well, that's a pretty cool deal. But then Trump remembered, oh, damn, yeah, we got to bomb Iran. Zero enrichment, zero this, zero that. Now, if we want to go forward, I don't think you get Iran to come back into the fold with 0%, with zero enrichment. I think there has to be a compromise. And is the United States and Israel ready to accept such a compromise? So that's the next hurdle that has to be crossed, is resolving the thing. But Iran has a lot of latitude here, because the attacks did not diminish Iran's potential. In fact, if anything, Iran is more dangerous today than they were before the attacks began, because the 60% enriched uranium has not been destroyed. The centrifuges, the IR6, IR8 advanced centrifuges, have not been destroyed. They can be, those cascades can be reestablished in secrecy, because Iran, I believe that the parliament voted to break relations with the IAEA. I don't know if the government's acted on that yet. But as Lavrov said, there's no reason for Iran to tell the IAEA where the 60% enrichment is, because the IAEA will just turn it over to the Israelis and the Americans, who will bomb. So Iran actually has a stronger position. It now, if it wanted to, could, in a very short period of time, produce enough highly enriched uranium. And I believe that they preserved much, or at least what was needed for at least pilot plant production of metal, uranium metal conversion, that they can enrich the 60% enriched uranium to 90, 92%, convert it to metal, and make a simple gun design that can go on a missile. So if the goal was to ensure that Iran couldn't have a nuclear weapon, they failed. The only thing that's lacking right now is Iran's political. And I apologize for the dogs, but we got people moving out in front of the house. The only thing lacking right now is the political will, and this is what Trump needs to capitalize on right now, is to cut a deal as quick as possible while Iran is willing to cut a deal. But if you push Iran into a corner, even the Russians have said publicly, there's no telling what they're going to do. The Russians are no longer saying Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. They're saying, because of you, Iran probably will have a nuclear weapon. And so I think we have to act quick. We, being the United States, have to act quick to cut a deal that brings this under control before it gets out of control. And this is something, the Israelis, didn't count upon. They, the fact that they failed. And they didn't just fail there. On ballistic missiles, they failed. Iran still has a considerable stockpile of these missiles. Many of them are the advanced models. And yes, while they destroyed certain infrastructure, the bottom line is Iran will be able to pour concrete, move dirt, install steel beams, and reestablish production capacity. They know how to do it. The hard part isn't the facility. The hard part is the knowledge. And Iran has the knowledge. So, they will be able to reconstitute ballistic missile production. So this is a failure for Israel across the board, but it's also a failure for Iran, because did Iran establish deterrence, a deterrence standard sufficient to have the Israelis say, we never want to do this again? And I think in the short term right now, the answer is no. But when Israel lifts the media blackout and the truth becomes apparent, let's see what happens to the political fallout. Let's see what happens when Benjamin Netanyahu has to tell the Israeli people the extent to which the damage has been done. And that may prove to be a constraint for Israel, seeking to go forward and continue to attack. So we're in a difficult period of time. Leadership is required. The United States should be the one to step forward. Can the world trust? Can Iran trust? Can anybody trust the United States after what has been done? Don't know.
I don't know if you saw the interview that John Kerry had with Christian Amanpour, in which he said that the people in the administration, the Trump administration, need to understand the case of Iranian nuclear program is something related to their knowledge. They can reproduce it, they can make it. But it seems the administration somehow feeling physically damaging these things that can bring some sort of, I don't know, they can push it back. But after all, it's 6 months, a year. How long does it take? It doesn't take that much to Iran to get back and reproduce everything. I think they need to understand this and find a permanent solution to what's going on. I don't know if anybody is willing to understand this.
I disagree with the notion that Iran's program has been pushed back 2 to 4 years. That's based upon an assessment derived from physical destruction of large facilities that, which for the most part had been evacuated. The Iranians, it's not like they woke up one day and said, "Oh my God, we got to evacuate." Iran was getting ready to open up a third major enrichment facility. That wasn't bombed. They still have the centrifuge cascades. That's underground too. That could be set up in a week. So now they take the 60% enriched uranium in there and they step it up. No inspections, no verification, no knowledge that this is being done. Now they have weapons grade uranium hexafluoride, and they bring in a pilot plant, and they just need to convert 90 kilograms to 90 pounds to metal. Once it's metal of that enrichment, the gun design, the United States, it's just physics at that point in time. It's not sophisticated, it's just physics. We didn't test the uranium bomb that we dropped on the Japanese because we didn't need to test it because we knew it would work. So the Iranians won't have to do a test. Everybody's like, "Oh, we're waiting for the Iranian test." Why? It's a gun design. It's a gun design that will probably, once it's all done, its configuration will weigh around 500 pounds. They have warheads that can carry 900 pounds. They have warheads even bigger than that, but on the Fahad 2, which is a maneuverable one that can almost guaranteed to hit its target, easily craft a functional gun design uranium weapon on that warhead. So the idea that what the United States and Israel did made the world safer, made it more dangerous, because now the Iranians have every incentive to go down that path. So the program hasn't been, pushed back or whatever. This is a fallacy. It's flawed thinking. And it actually plays to Iran's benefit, because if you actually believe that you have retarded or neutralized their capability for 2 to 4 years, then your guard's down. Oh, we don't have to worry about it. Guys, you got to worry about it right now. That's why you need to immediately address this issue and get an agreement in place that gives Iran what it wants with that, and also removes from any possibility the notion of an Iranian nuclear weapon.
Here is, Scott, you mentioned the ballistic missiles of Iran being used, but the Israeli channel 12 reported that Iran did not launch any cruise missiles at Israel during the war. It seems that these are much difficult to be intercepted. Why did they not use it? Because they didn't need they somehow felt that they can hit with other missiles, they don't need to use them? What was the main reason, in your opinion?
I don't know. I would speculate that these cruise missiles, I believe Iran had a war plan that they were implementing. They were working off of a campaign strategy that had been planned, and they had assets dedicated to each level of the campaign, and that campaign could be expanded or contracted as necessary. If Iran says that they're preparing to hit American bases, or they're preparing to hit regional oil production, you don't want to waste a ballistic missile on an oil field. Fire a cruise missile at the oil field. So maybe they were holding on to these cruise missiles for the oil infrastructure phase of the campaign. We don't know how this campaign was impacted by Israeli military actions. No plan survives initial contact with the enemy. That's just an old saying. And we don't know what Israel accomplished. I don't know if the Iranians will ever be honest about this, but, Israel did strike missile facilities throughout Iran, and some of those facilities were having secondary explosions and glow that suggested that Israel penetrated, and there was a lot going underground. So we don't know what's left of the Iranian arsenal. We don't know if a diminished arsenal helped persuade the Iranian government to seek a ceasefire because they weren't able to sustain this. Iran didn't launch any cruise missiles, but is that because they're all intact, or did Israel manage to penetrate some of these storage facilities and block that? We just don't know. What we do know is this: both Israel and Iran were desperate for the ceasefire. We know that because they both took it up instantly. Could you let's be honest here. If last week, in the midst of this conflict, if I said the United States attacks Iran, what do you expect to happen? Massive retaliation, right? And then after that massive retaliation, what do you expect to happen? More escalation, automatic. So would you at any moment a week ago said, no, what will happen is an immediate ceasefire? Do those two things lend themselves to a ceasefire under normal logic? And the answer is no. It lends itself to escalation. The fact that Iran immediately agreed to a ceasefire means there's a reason that they did this. They feel vulnerable. They're not achieving their objectives. And one of those could be that they have lost considerable assets, or the fact that they don't have an air defense capable of protecting the Iranian people from Israeli attacks. Israel was starting to single out neighborhoods in Tehran for destruction. And if you can't protect it and you're the regime, you're saying, well, wait a minute, at some point in time, the people may turn against us because we can't protect them. And I also believe that the Iranian government truly believes in protecting the Iranian people. It cares for the welfare of the Iranian people. So they're looking at a situation where, their citizens are suffering. There's nothing they can do to protect it. Look what they did again, I got in trouble with Mr. Morandi once when I mentioned this, but I know my history. The Iraqis fired 189 missiles into Tehran and other cities during the War of the Cities back in 1988-89. And Ayatollah Khomeini had said, we're in it for good. Saddam's got to go. The end of it, we're never going to stop till Saddam's gone. And then he had to drink that bitter cup of poison to make a peace because they had no other choice. Why? Because the people of Tehran were fleeing. They were helpless. There was nothing they could do to stop this. And I believe that was the situation that confronted this government. And it's something I told Mr. Morandi will happen, that the damage that will be done to Iran will be such that they will be compelled to drink a bitter cup of poison and seek a peace, that Iran's not going to achieve what it wants to achieve. It doesn't mean that I didn't want Iran to achieve it. I personally would like to see Iran break Israel's back, but apparently that wasn't in the cards. Israel was able to inflict damage on Iran. And Iran was also looking at a potential escalation that could bring in more American military power that would bring even more damage to Iran. So I think Trump didn't want to do that. Trump didn't want to get sucked into a long-lasting regional war. And so I think they both were able to come to a common sense saying, the Iranians, we don't want to be bombed. And Trump saying, we really don't want to bomb you. And so ceasefire. We won't know until both sides open up the books and start telling us what really happened, but we can speculate.
In both cases, you've mentioned the war with Iraq. and with Israel, both countries attacked Iran. Iran didn't attack these countries. They started attacking Iran, and Iran had to respond, had to fight with them. But what has happened since then? Many people somehow thought that the Iranian people would, as you saw, not Netanyahu, it was Naftali Bennett, all his administration were talking about it. The people in Iran would rise up and would overthrow the government in Iran, and everything in the aftermath of killing the commanders, everything going to be destroyed. It's somehow, I said it before, we talked about it before. It was delusional to think of it, because they know the nature, the tradition, the culture of Iranian people. They may disagree. Every night they gather, they talk to each other, they criticize each and every part of the government, each and every part of the government in Iran. But after all, when something comes in and something is fighting them, they're going to unite. It was somehow, and it wasn't just Israel and the United States talking this way. Look at the way that they were using their positions in the United States and outside Iran. They were somehow so much delusional about regime change in Iran.
Well, regime change is you say delusional, but let's reflect on it for a minute. Saddam Hussein, gone. Bashar al-Assad, gone. Nasrallah, gone. The Sudanese leader, gone. So now I've successfully eliminated many of these leaders. And am I delusional now to believe that maybe if we applied the same strategies, the tactics and all that we couldn't get regime change in Iran? I mean, let's be honest. How many people thought that Bashar al-Assad in September of 2023 was vulnerable to total collapse? Wasn't on my bingo card. Was it on yours? No. But it happened because of the gradual erosion of Syrian society and Syrian leadership and all this stuff. I'm not saying that's the situation in Iran. In fact, I believe the exact opposite. I've mentioned several times, the meeting with Raisi in September of 2023, when he opened up the conversation by talking about the events of the summer of 2023. He called it the greatest threat to the survival of the revolution of the Islamic Republic, because of the unrest that was done by the Western powers and other powers trying to use these various elements within Iran to bring down the government. He said, but we survived and we became stronger from it. The government has learned many lessons, but the people rallied around the government and we are stronger from it. And so my belief is that if you attack Iran today, the people will once again rally around the government. But you just never know. The psychology of nations, what holds a nation together is an unquantifiable. At some point in time, all societies have the potential of collapse. But I don't believe the conditions were met here to do that. But I can't say it's delusional to imagine the possibility of bringing down Iran. And they continue to believe it. Yeah, I'll say this. When Saddam Hussein, when the war ended in 1991, and they unleashed the inspectors on Iraq, that was supposed to be about containing Saddam. And indeed, the United States viewed it as a mechanism to get rid of Saddam, to starve his nation through sanctions, never letting sanctions to be lifted, even if Iraq complied with its disarmament obligation. But the Israelis weren't patient enough. The Israelis believed that Saddam represented an existential threat. Plus, they had vindictive hearts. And immediately after the war ended in March of 1991, the new head of Israeli military intelligence, Yuri Segei, put forward a plan to the Israeli leadership and said, we need to kill Saddam. The only way we'll ever be secure is to kill Saddam. Regime change. That's it. And they began moving on that plan. In November of 1993, they're ready to act on it. They had an assassination plan ready to implement. Adnan Khalila was in a Jordanian hospital under life support because of diabetes. The Israeli Mossad was in the hospital. They could kill him at will. And when they killed him, they already knew what the funeral arrangements would be. Khalila would be brought back to Baghdad, mourning, taken to Tikrit. Saddam would fly in, and there would be a funeral. And they knew the layout of Auja, where there was take place. They knew where the family plot was. And they had Sariyat Matkal team that was going to fly in and have these special missiles. And as Saddam came in, they'd fire the missiles and they'd kill Saddam, and then they'd escape. Plan was there. Going to happen. Not hypothetical. Going to happen. The final rehearsal went south. They fired live missiles into the car carrying the soldier pretending to be Saddam. Ironically, the driver and everybody around him died, but the guy pretending to be Saddam was just injured. But the point is they canceled that hit. But that didn't mean that they were done with Saddam. They said, okay, that's done, but we will continue to focus on his removal. And it wasn't until literally I intervened and met with Uri Segei in October of 1994 and convinced them to stop the regime change and focus on containing Saddam through supporting the work of the inspectors that the Israelis shifted. And the interesting thing about that is once Israel bought into the inspection process and supported it and worked to make it viable, the threat assessment of Saddam dropped from number 1 threat to number 8 threat, number 6 or number 8. My memory is eluding me at the time, but it was low. But they also, I remember talking to the guy he was a colonel, and his job was to be Saddam. His job was to think like Saddam. And he's the guy that said Saddam is an irrational actor. We have to kill him, da-da-da. But by the time I finished working with him about the reality of Iraq, Saddam was seen as a rational actor that Israel could peacefully coexist with so long as Saddam didn't have access to weapons of mass destruction. And so I bring that up for 2 reasons. One, I'm convinced today that Israel is vindictive and they continue to hold on to regime change fantasies. That even though Israel accepted this ceasefire, they want to kill Ali Khamenei and they want to kill the president, and they are actively conspiring to do that. If the opportunity comes up for them to kill these leaders, they will kill these leaders and not worry about where the chips fall, just like they were going to do in 1993, kill Saddam. But I'm also convinced that if a viable plan backed by the United States to contain Iran's nuclear ambitions is put on the table, that the regime change fantasy can be put aside as it was in 1994. So, past is precedent, and let's see what happens. The regime change fantasy went away in 94, but it regrew in 2002, 2003. The whole purpose of the invasion of Iraq was to get rid of Saddam Hussein, and the Israelis backed that. Why? Because it's not that we couldn't contain Iraq with weapons inspections. We clearly could, but that the United States itself was never able to deviate from the regime change track. And here I'm worried, because here I see Lindsey Graham on the Senate floor talking about regime change. I see President Trump tweeting stupid things about regime change. And I'm just wondering if at the foundation of American policy, that this whole talk about stability is just a subterfuge for regime change. And people say, well, why would you believe that? Well, I don't know, because the United States set the Iranians up for negotiations. It was subterfuge for a knockout blow to kill their leadership. I mean, that's a big deal. This isn't like a minor thing. It's not like, a coach giving a bunt sign, oh gosh, we shouldn't have bunt, we should have swung. No, this is about your entire approach to the game, the players you recruit, the training you do. Regime change was built into the very beginning of this operation. The success of this operation depended on regime change, and that wasn't just Israel signing off, that was America signing off. So I don't think we've walked away from the regime change policy, and this is why it's very important that we get other nations to jump in. The United States cannot be in control of this. Other nations have to come in and get a nuclear deal on the table that meets the satisfactions of the Iranians and demonstrates that the problem of Iran, as defined by a potential nuclear threat, is a containable problem, and therefore stop the regime change nonsense.
Just look at the name of the operation. Israeli operation on Iran was Rising Lions. They were not talking about Israelis. They were talking about Iranians. But
they were talking about the Shah. They were talking about the Shah's son.
yeah.
I mean, but the ultimate victory, I guess, is that he stopped following Donald Trump on X. He's so mad right now because he thought he was going to be. This guy actually thought he was going to be the next Shah. Delusional.
Scott, what the Iranian supreme leader said last month, it was somehow amazing when we look at it right now. He said that the enemy, we can get hit from inside, not from outside. And it came out to be, you look at the situation, it was all about it. It was, look at the network inside Iran, look at the way they try to manipulate the situation in Iran. It was all about, and you remember one of the in the middle of one of the prominent universities in Iran, in Tehran, University of Tehran, there was a woman naked, everything. She just took off everything just to make some sort of movement in Iran. They couldn't, because the government is getting smarter. They know what these people are looking for, they're seeking for. And in terms of this sort of terrorist attack in Iran, this network, most of these people, I'm not talking about all of them, but most of them were undocumented immigrants, Scott.
Or what?
Undocumented immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
They were participating for a decade with this Israeli intelligence.
Israel's been flooding Iran with these. They took advantage of the war in Afghanistan, the refugees coming in. They took advantage of Israel takes advantage of everything. I mean, the Israelis are master plotters. They'll take advantage of Kurdish unrest, to plant, you got PJAK operatives in northern Iraq. Israel will infiltrate fighters into PJAK, and then PJAK will send them back into Iran for training, and they'll become part of the Kurdish element. Then they'll disappear. The same thing with Azeris. All of these different ethnic groups. And then Iran's proclivity, which is common in the region, to use third-party nationals as a labor force. So you want to build your thing. You bring in these undocumented immigrants who then are involved in construction and become part of Iranian society. They can live, in here, there, and everywhere. And Israel was masterful in exploiting that to get these networks in. Yeah.
Today I talked with Professor Morandi. He said that after the American attack, something has happened after the American attack on Iran. Iran wants to get closer to the east, to Russia and China. They know that they cannot trust the United States. And do you believe that these people who have decided, for whatever reason, let's put it this way, decided to attack Iran, do they really understand the gravity of their decision and the future of what could have happened between Iran and the United States? Maybe with Russia would be part of that. That could bring, we talk about it, that could bring some sort of balance. But it doesn't seem that would be the case for the United States foreign policy. There is no strategic way of thinking when it comes to the foreign policy. Everybody is looking for something to achieve in terms of the domestic policy. They want to achieve something for the near future, not anything for a long run.
There's parallels here between what I call Russophobia, the disease of Russophobia that has infected the American people, so that we can't think rationally about Russia because we're led to believe the most base things about the Russian people. And then we think, we accept at face value anything negative said about Russia and the Russian people, even though the truth is so far different. And I've been struggling against Russophobia for some time now. I took 2 trips to Russia recently, extensive trips, and have been trying to educate the Americans about the reality of Russia. And it's an uphill struggle. And all I can say is that Russians in 1979 didn't take over an American embassy and humiliate 53 American diplomats for 440 some odd days. Iran did. Russia didn't blow up a Marine barracks in Beirut, killing 241 U.S. service members while they slept. Iran was complicit in that. You see what I'm trying to say here is that we already have, I don't know what the proper term would be, Iranophobia.
And the United States didn't do regime change in Russia.
Oh, no, yeah. Oh, well, we tried.
It did in Iran.
Yeah, we tried. We tried in Russia. We just failed. But 53. Look, there's a huge history, but I'm talking about the American issue. Look at one of the big things in the idiot media of America. As long as they shout death to America, we can never consider being, on good relations with Iran. And I'm like, do you even know what death to America means? It doesn't mean death to America. The Iranian people, go to Iran and you will find out. Go to Iran, stand up and say, I am an American. And they'll come up and say, hey, glad to meet you. How you doing? Come on over to my house. Give you some cookies, some bread, your cake. Let's talk. Why are you so mad? We're not mad at you. We just, and it's disarming. to be honest, it's very disarming because they're so friendly and so cultured and so knowledgeable, and everything you think you know about Iran goes out the window if you go to Iran to visit. But today the American people are just easily manipulated. All we have to do is say the U.S. embassy was taken over, Beirut bombing. Now we have the new mantra of, we got armless and legless veterans. I was in southern Iraq in 2005 when my vehicle hit an explosively formed projectile that came from Iran. I'm sorry. Why were you in Iraq again? 2005, is that after the illegal invasion and occupation of Iraq? I mean, while I have sympathy for you as an individual, come on, stop blaming Iran. Because the last time I checked, you had to fly thousands of miles to get to southern Iraq. And the Iranians are just right across the border. So imagine, put it in perspective. Stop blaming the Iranians for doing things that they have to do to protect their national security interests. Be mature about all this. But the fact of the matter is, we are infected with Iranophobia. My next project, if I can do it, if I don't get killed by the FBI, I'm seriously thinking about this. I don't know if I'm the person to do it. Maybe somebody else needs to do it, but somebody in the United States has to take the lead on an anti-Iranophobia program, which means to begin engagement with the Iranian people, engagement with the nation of Iran, to begin this process of educating Americans about the reality of Iran. Because right now in the United States, for instance, on the Russia side, we have Brighton Beach, which is full of, Jewish immigrants who hate Russia, hate the Soviet Union, but they speak with a nice Russian accent. And so they're good to get on TV and go, oh, Russia bad. Yeah, beer, vodka. No good, no good. And everybody goes, see, Russians are bad. And then we have Hollywood that just presents the Russians as being drunk alcoholics, criminals, mafia, and all this kind of stuff, dark, evil. And we do the same thing with the Iranians. Look at every program. The Iranians come off as, brooding, terroristic. There was that show Homeland, where the hero played by the guy who played Captain Winters in the Band of Brothers ended up getting hung in the street in Tehran, well, because he murdered the head of the IRGC, but that's different. But the point is, the Iranians, I watched the way they portrayed Iran. I was in Tehran. They portrayed this dark city, gloomy, everything, nothing. I was in it at night, Tehran, lit up, people out there walking, restaurants open. Come on, man. It was vibrant, alive. And somebody needs to do this. We need to begin people-to-people connectivity with the Iranian people so that we can defeat this Iranophobia, so that when Lindsey Graham gets up on the floor of the Senate and starts spewing nonsense, people can shout him down and say, get the hell out of here. When the Shah's son steps up, say, you're not a representative of Iran. When the diaspora in LA starts screaming and shouting, say, shut up. You guys fled because you supported the Shah that was a prisoner of the CIA that created the Savak that tortured the Iranian people. And nobody in Iran wants you to come back. They might want you individually to come back if you make amends, but nobody wants the return of the Shah. There's zero support for that. All the Iranian people want to do is live in peace, and all we need to do to live in peace with them is respect them. It is a theocracy. There's no doubt about that. And the role of religion is made. But I got a question for you. I've been looking at videos that are coming out of Iran of women walking around without the hijab on. Now, is this just BS propaganda, or is this a thing in northern Tehran where girls can actually not walk around with the hijab on and not get beat up by the religious police?
It's not just about Tehran. All the cities in Iran, they're not putting the proper hijab as they talk, and nobody's caring about it. The government just gave up on that. They're not.
Raisi hinted at this. It was funny because he said, we made many mistakes. Yeah. He said this in September 20th. He said, we as the government made many mistakes and we need to rectify our errors. And he didn't get specific, but he was talking about the hijab thing that took that poor girl, that the Kurdish girl that got killed or died, whatever the narrative that is. The bottom line is, if she wasn't taken up off the street because of a hijab violation, there wouldn't have been a crisis, because if she truly had a heart defect, she would have dropped dead of her own volition later on, but she dropped dead in a police station after being arrested and being upset about it. So the government made many mistakes. And it heartens me if what you're saying is true. And I'm not doubting you. I just didn't want to jump in on it because I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is the internet. This is, you don't know, the context of all this, but
we may go to Iran together, Scott. And you see,
I'm not against that, but be careful traveling with me. I'm a volatile person. But no, but I think this is important because we have idiots are saying we need to confront this regime on behalf of the Iranian women, and I'm like, really? How'd that work out for the Afghan women that you confronted the Taliban on behalf of? You abandoned them, you use them as a cause. But do the Iranian women really need to be rescued? I mean, when I was there, I remember it was 2006 or 7. When did Ahmadinejad first get elected? It was right after he got elected. So was that 2006?
Yeah.
So this would have been in September of 2006.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was invited I had to go register with the Ministry of Information because I was a journalist. And so I had to go get my credentials. And I came in, and the lady who ran it came out, and I immediately put my hand out to shake her hand. And she's like, no, I can't, and she wasn't angry, but she was like, no, I can't. I'm like, whoa, yeah, I forgot where I was for a minute. And so it is an Islamic Republic. There are rules and regulations and norms and values and standards that don't necessarily comport with the West, but that's okay because it's Iran. I was never led. My guide, I had 2 guides. I was there on official business, but it was funny when I arrived, even though the Zarif, who was the ambassador to the United Nations, he green stamped, he approved all this. He said, go there. Everything's going to work out. We've got an agenda for you. The foreign ministry is ready to receive you. And I got there, and the IRGC went, yeah, we're not ready to receive you. What the hell are you doing here? We know who you are. We know your background. Why are you here? And everything got held up. So I had my official guide from the translator. But what he told me is, he said, look, we'll go do some stuff. We'll try and make your agenda work. But he said, go hire a civilian tour guide. We're not going to tell you who to pick. Just go hire one and go see Iran. Just go see Iran. Go do it. Well, I hired a tour guide. She was a female. And she brought in her assistant, who was also a female. They were funny, witty. They sat down at a table with me. We had coffee and tea. We didn't shake hands or anything, but we communicated. It wasn't, this barrier. And they took me around Iran. I got to go to Kashan. I got to, up in the mountains, there was this wonderful village where the women, it's famous for the headscarf with roses on it, I guess. If you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. It's in Isfahan.
And
it's
a wonderful place. I mean, it was just a beautiful country, beautiful people. I laughed because, I'm thinking Iran backwards. So we're on the highway leading out of Tehran, and we stop at a rest stop. Now, I've been to Turkey, and I've gone to Turkish rest stops, and I have to tell you, they're bad. They smell, it's the hygiene. This thing, you could have eaten off the bathroom floor. It was clean, everything, the food. And I'm like, what the hell? This is better than the New York State Thruway. Literally, the quality of the roads was better, and the rest stop was better. And I'm like, wait a minute, Iran's a funky little place, man. It's all right. It doesn't mean it's perfect. I was able to go into southern Tehran and go into the working class section because I wanted to talk to people who were pro Ahmadinejad. And the official guide took me there, and we had lots of conversations. Well, it turns out, yes, there was a lot of pro Ahmadinejad, but there's a lot of people who are anti Ahmadinejad, and they're looking around saying, look at this rat hole. Look at this. You know, look at the roads, look at the quality of the houses, look at the water when I turn it on. It's not working. We need a government that works. It's the same everywhere in the world. There's no such thing as utopia. But the funny thing was, even the people that were making these complaints would invite me in. They were the greatest hosts in the world. I didn't meet. The only place there was a modicum of hostility was with the IRGC, because initially they just didn't trust me. But in the end, I think I may have told you this before, where I was at a restaurant and IRGC guys came in. I think it was a setup. You know, they were supposed to be an accidental meet, but because they're not allowed to meet with Americans, but they were from the American branch of the IRGC intelligence wing. I'm like, sure, this is an accident, but they just wanted to talk. They weren't trying to recruit me. They weren't trying to do it. They just wanted to talk. They were just like, hey, let's have a conversation, you know, talk about America. Why do you guys think that? And I asked them questions, and they made some amazing statements. I mean, one of them, admitted to, when he was young, going to Berlin to kill opposition people. He wouldn't tell me if he actually carried out an assassination, but he said, there's a reason why I had to leave Berlin. I'm like, okay. I said, so you are a terrorist? And he said, from your perspective, absolutely. I committed acts of terrorism. He said, from our perspective, I'm a freedom fighter. I'm killing traitors to our nation. But what he said was even more amazing. He said, you know, we came back from that, and we were raised to hate the West, to view the West as evil and all this stuff. And then, but you go to Berlin, he said, we saw a society that worked, a society that functioned. And so he said the IRGC turned out to be one of the bigger proponents of change in Iran, not to have pornography and strip clubs and alcohol. No, but why can't we do business? Why can't we become involved in business? Why can't we function like this? So when people talk about the IRGC getting into business and this is an evil thing, I'm thinking, no, that's about the IRG actually taking the lead in imposing a new way of doing, of interacting with the West, of doing business. It's not Iran is, of course, has its problems, and I'm not sitting here pretending the IRGC is perfect. I'm sure there's corruption in the IRGC, as there is anywhere when you deal with money and all that. But the idea that these people are out to get the West is wrong. They actually have bent over backwards to get along with the West. They wanted to get away, but as you mentioned, that may not be an option anymore because of what just happened. And the role that the United States played in this, and the deceit of Europe as well. I mean, the Iranians have to sit up and realize that as much as they want it to be aligned with the West and friendly with the West, that their future is actually to the east, with Russia, the North-South economic corridor, with China, the New Silk Road. And many Iranians, because you look at the geography of Iran, look where it's at. But Iran wasn't oriented towards doing business with Turkmenistan, with Central Asia, with Kazakhstan. They were oriented with the West. But now Iran's starting to pivot, going, there is huge opportunity here. Huge opportunity. I mean, you're trying to break into a European market that's already been, calcified in terms of, market share. It's tough. The Eurasian Economic Union is just sitting there for Iran to develop and prosper from. And I think that's the direction Iran's going to be heading. I agree with you. They're going to be moving in that direction. But they can't do that if we continue to want to kill their leaders and constrain them. Trump said something interesting today, or tweeted something about now China can buy all the Iranian oil they want to. as an interesting statement. The implication is that Trump may be moving to lift sanctions. I don't know if he'll be able to pull that because he's got to get through the Congress, and the Congress is full of people who continue to hold Iran accountable for the death to America chants. So that's why I think the project of overcoming Iranophobia, I don't know, I just made up that word. I don't know if it's the right word, but I think it's as important as the project to overcome Russophobia.
The village you mentioned is called Abiane.
Yes.
It's between
It's
Kashan and Isfahan. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful village. Gorgeous village. And the people were amazing. And I actually bought 3 of their scarves to bring back for my wife and my 2 daughters. And I know upstairs my wife's got that scarf. It's funny. It's like anything. I buy my wife these things that are great, but because they're so great, she doesn't want to wear them. So she's like, I've got this, but I can't wear it because it's so special. So we've got a whole drawer full of stuff I bought that she never wears because it's just too special to wear. But that scarf is it's an important symbol of Iran. I mean, there's meaning behind it. It's not a trivial thing. It's part of, in Russia they speak of the Russian soul, and I don't know if the Iranians use the same term, but it's part of that which defines the inner being of Iran.
We call it Iranian proud. It's an Iranian dignity, something like this. And in Iran, it's literally the translation would be Iranian dignity.
Good thing to be dignified about. I mean, in America, we seem to be happy about massive ordnance penetrators. That's what gives us dignity. But the Iranians, if the beauty of this village and the beauty of the roses. I was there. I don't think it was the Rose Festival. But I was there. I was going through Kashan, and everything was roses. They had rose water. They had so there was something going on about roses. I can't remember what it was.
It's a festival. Really, it's a festival about roses. They prepare everything. They gather them. They produce the water of those roses and
rose water. Yeah. And they make perfume too. They were selling little vials of rose perfume. But I remember when I was in the United Arab Emirates. You're frozen, so I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Can you hear me, Scott?
I can hear you now. Yeah. I went to the UAE. I was speaking at it was Abu Dhabi that I went to, and the emir. The conference was done. I was in the hotel, and I was walking out of the hotel, and they had bodyguards and everything. Guy came and go, well, you can't go out. I think you're Scott Ritter. And I said, well, I'm nobody. Just let me go walk around the streets. I'm used to it. He goes, no. Where do you want to go? I said, well, I want to buy my wife a gift. And he said, okay. What does she like? I said, I don't know, perfume. So in the limo we go to the store, and we go in there, and there's a perfume called the Rose of Taif, which is a particular perfume. Taif is a Saudi place, but apparently this perfume is very big for weddings and stuff like that. But it's very rare and very expensive. I had no idea at the time. None. And so he was like, I said, well, what's a popular Rose of Taif? I said, well, okay, I'll take it. The next thing you know, they package it up and they give it to me, and I go, well, I'm ready to pay. He goes, no, it's a gift. And I'm like, all right, I mean, what is it, $80 bottle of perfume? No, like a $5,000 bottle of perfume. And we still have it upstairs because my wife smelled it. She goes, makes me smell like a grandma. So she wasn't a big fan of it, but the beautiful package and all that stuff. But but the Iranians had their equivalent of it. They it wasn't the Rose Taif, but it was whatever, the Iranian rose or the rose of something. It smelled the same, but it was cheaper.
They call it Muhammadi, Scott. They call it Muhammadi. It's come from the name of the Prophet Muhammad. Yeah.
The Prophet, right? But it all I know is that it smelled the same, but it was a lot cheaper. So
yeah, exactly. Scott, when it comes to the bigger picture right now, I think with what has happened between Iran and Israel, we can somehow be more interested in what's going on in the bigger picture of the Middle East and the war in Ukraine. It doesn't seem that Europeans are giving up on the situation in Ukraine. Here is what the NATO Secretary General said.
Are rapidly, when it comes to Africa and the G5 Sahel, but also generally Africa, mid and north of Africa, the Chinese and the Russians are rapidly gaining influence. So let's not be naive. That's why we have a special representative. I personally have a special representative for the southern neighborhood. For the south, and therefore southern neighborhood and the southern flank. And he is constantly traveling, this guy who is really excellent, traveling all these countries and making sure that wherever NATO can help, we do.
Yeah, he wants to fight Russia and China in Africa. Is the conflict going to expand into Africa? What are we going to see, in your opinion, the bigger picture of what's going on?
As NATO declines as a military alliance, and one of the reasons for their decline is that they can't afford to be a real military alliance. It's just prohibitively expensive. I think you'll see them turn increasingly to, asymmetrical and hybrid like, actions designed to overextend and weaken Russia. Russia and China are committed to the African continent in a way that has surprised and surpassed Europe and the United States. And I think Europe is very concerned about, Russia getting control, sort of outflanking Europe by now being the dominant force. Like in the Sahel right now, Russia is the dominant influence in the Sahel. France used to be. Europe's not prepared for that transition. But everywhere we look throughout Africa, there's a rejection of, post-colonial, neo-colonial presence. And China is making tremendous inroads that isn't fully yet comprehended because it's primarily economic in nature. But the Chinese are everywhere. Their infrastructure is everywhere. Europe's got nothing to compete on that. I mean, what is NATO going to come in with? Is NATO going to come in and build bridges? No, NATO's a military alliance. So NATO offers security solutions, but they can't deliver on on their promises. Russia can. The Africa Corps is a specific Ministry of Defense entity designed to provide security solutions to African continent problems, sort of a descendant of Wagner. Wagner just left Mali because Wagner's done. I mean, it's transitioning out. You're seeing it being incorporated increasingly into Russia or brought into different structures that are more closely controlled by Moscow, by the Russian government. But the Africa Corps is there. China doesn't have the equivalent of the Africa Corps because their primary focus is business. But NATO can't compete with Russia militarily in Africa, and they can't compete with China economically. So I think you're going to see them trying to do, little attacks here, encourage instability regimes, etc. You see France already taking a lead, trying to reassert itself into places like Burkina Faso and Mali and elsewhere. You see Ukraine increasingly, NATO using Ukraine as a proxy of violent activity. Ukraine is heavily involved in the Sahel. They're involved in Sudan, anywhere where they can create instability for the Russians, and NATO is using Ukraine as a vector for that. It's very it's destabilizing, but in the end, it's not going to succeed because to sustain this, NATO needs a homogeneous Europe. That is a Europe that is united, thinks alike, et cetera. And Europe's fracturing apart right now. And so it's an unsustainable model. And ultimately, it's going to fail because of its ineffectiveness, lack of focus, lack of vision. And nobody wants to be a part of this anymore. It's not as though the United States and NATO are the only show in town. There are now alternatives out there that promise a better future. Russia just inked a deal with Burkina Faso to finalize the construction of a nuclear power plant to bring nuclear energy to the Sahel. Hell, France has been building nuclear power reactors for decades. Why didn't they bring one into the Sahel? Because they didn't view it as a necessity. They were simply extracting mineral resources from the region to benefit France almost exclusively. Now you have the Russians coming in saying, how do we help you? Because what is the purpose of nuclear energy? It's not just, getting Russian involvement, but the energy that's produced will enable Burkina Faso to build the infrastructure necessary to not just extract resources, but convert the resources into materials usable in modern industry and to build the industry itself. So you don't have to ship this stuff up to Europe to turn it into an automobile or things like that. You build the air in Burkina Faso. And that is a fundamental game changer in how the African economy is going to work, how African societies are going to build a viable middle class. It's going to be a massive transformation. I don't know if it'll succeed, but I do know that it's been given a chance because of Russia. And the African people know that, as opposed to, decades of European and American, support, which has always been about, what does America do? We go and we dig wells in the village and we bring fresh water to the villagers so that the quaint villagers can go out and hand pump the water out and then smile as they get to drink fresh water and go back to their mud huts. Here's the Russian approach is, we're going to build a water pumping station. We're going to pull it out. We're going to build modern housing, modern infrastructure. We're going to be a factory, jobs, money, banks. Suddenly you see Africa looking like Europe. Oh, whoa, wait a minute. We don't want Africa to look like Europe. We need Africa to be full of quaint mud villages. Why can't, did Europe have to stay, a nation of thatched wooden houses, or did it advance into something different? Africa needs to advance into something different, something more modern, something that brings the quality of life to Africa up to that of the rest of the world. And Russia has a working model for that. China has a working model for that. Europe and the United States don't. All we bring is death and destruction. We want to sell you guns, but we don't want to help you build homes.
Scott, before wrapping up, how do you see the situation with Ukraine? The negotiations are coming, they're talking to each other, but after all, Zelensky doesn't seem to want any sort of ceasefire, any sort of agreement. And Donald Trump, by just removing himself from the talks and somehow put it in the hand of the Zelensky administration, and we know that behind the scene Europeans are running the show, it doesn't seem that they're going to get anything with the talks with Russia.
No, the talks are over. Talks are over. I mean, they may continue, but they're over. Nothing is going to happen from the talks. Russia goes through the motions of the talks to appease Donald Trump. But in terms of the real reality, it's being done on the battlefield. It's being done in the skies over Kiev, Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkov, Lvov, the cities, Odessa, that are being bombed incessantly by the Russians. And Zelensky's becoming sort of a pathetic character. Trump ignored him at the G7. The G7 couldn't come up with a unified stance on Ukraine. The NATO summit, I guess they dropped the Ukrainian aspect of the summit. He wasn't invited, but he showed up, Zelensky, because he thinks he's going to meet with Donald Trump on the side. I'd be surprised if Donald Trump gave him the time of day. The bottom line is that, the Ukrainian portfolio has been handed to Europe, and Europe is incapable of managing this portfolio. They can't afford it. They can't reach agreement upon it. Hungary and Slovakia just vetoed the 18th tranche of sanctions against Russia. That'll be overcome, but it shows the friction that's involved. I don't think Zelensky survives the summer. I mean, we'll see. He's shown tremendous resilience and all that, but the Russians have made it clear that whatever solution is to be had with Ukraine will not be had with Zelensky. I mean, Putin said, I made with him, but I can't do any deals with him. The deals will have to be signed by the legitimate government of Ukraine, and he ain't it. So I think Europe's going to realize that he's too much baggage and that they're going to have to move forward with a new government. Now you enter a whole new realm, because if you get a new government, you're not going to get someone that, speaks the European talking points. Zelensky has them memorized. He can say them. He's a professional propagandist. He's an actor. He's good at reading from a script, and that's what he's doing. You might get a real politician who actually cares about the Ukrainian people, and it says, we have to bring this conflict to an end. And as we've seen with the Israelis and the Iranians, when the political pressure is to bring this conflict to an end, the things that used to be important aren't important anymore. And,
Zelensky doesn't care about Ukrainians. That's why he doesn't
not
want.
at all. Yeah, not at all. He doesn't care about them at all. And you saw this. I mean, denying death benefits to the soldiers of, to the families of the fallen. I mean, if you're a true patriot, you would say to Europe, hey, look, we got to do a ceasefire here because these people lost their family members. I have to take care of them. That's my responsibility as the president. But when we do the ceasefire, I need you to give me some money for these people. I can't afford it. You need to step up and help me on this one. That should be his priority. But instead, he's ignored them, and he's trying to take that money and use it. He said, I'm going to buy weapons. You don't have to give me weapons. I'm going to buy weapons. But the whole thing, because it's all his ability to buy weapons is predicated on Europe's willingness to transfer seized Russian assets to his control. This man lives in a fantasy world.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Thank you. And start planning that Iran trip. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. We're going to do this. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.